Hey everybody, welcome to Man Uncaved. I'm your host Shane. Welcome back. If you've listened to me before, wow, it's amazing. All right, tonight's topic, because if you have listened to me before, I go off on some severe tangents. Sometimes I try to bring it back. Where we get this nice little, we put it in a nice little wrapping paper with a bow, and you kind of get like the home game, the home version. And sometimes we do. I like when things go in full circle. So here we are. So let me get back to stay on topic. And this is actually a great segue, maybe, for exactly what we're going to talk about. Is this idea? We're gonna blend a couple ideas here together. We're gonna blend Autopilot with Groundhog's Day and being an active participant. Stay tuned. You don't want to cut off just yet, because this one is going to be packed. Check this out, how we kind of mesh all these together to make some kind of a formula. It's been once been said that we operate from 80 to 95% of our behaviors live in the unconscious. 80 to 95%, that's a shitload that we're not actually seeing. This could be in deep reference to what is called the shadow as well. First of all, really understanding the unconscious parts of self and where those stem from. Of course, there's a lot of deep belief systems down in there. There's deep experiences in there. A lot of childhood stuff, small T, big T trauma. You get your family system trauma. You get your other environmental factors, society, culture. That's all traumatic. Can be traumatic. Again, small T, big T. Recognizing that most of our behaviors live on this autopilot. That's our normal state of being. Unconscious areas of self tend to be really self-seeking, really to fulfill what I like to talk about is these emotional basic needs. They tend to live in that area. They're constantly analyzing their environment. How can I get these needs met, right? So the need of feeling validated, maybe the feeling of love, of acceptance, belonging. Hold for a second this idea of the sense of belonging. Such evolutionary purposes within the sense of belonging. Think about that as species. We are herd animals. We are wired to live social. Hence, I like to say we're not meant to live alone in isolation on an island with a volleyball calling Wilson. We live in these herds. If you can imagine that at the head of in the beginning of time, the species, later to be Homo sapiens, but in the beginning of this species, we were not the head of the food chain, actually. We were the bottom of the food chain. It's so interesting that, animals ate us. Being that could be a danger or a survival to the species, we learned a sense of belonging. And the sense of belonging kept us in these herds because low-hanging fruit gets eaten. We don't belong. We're susceptible to prey. So as a species, we still have that in us, right? There's definitely a sense of belonging. You can see that with certain, within sports, there's a sense of belonging. The city, LA, Kansas City, wherever it might be, there's a sense of belonging to that. And then the team is the representation of. There's a sense of gangs, a mafia to street gangs, any organized crime. Criminal activity could belong to these gangs. And so we see that, we see that at a very young age. We see that in school. We see groups of people. I was never the cool kid. I wasn't the jock. I was really skinny growing up. So I didn't fit in those areas. I wasn't like the cool hip hop kid either. Very awkward looking growing up. So I didn't belong there. Even though I could hang out with the taggers, sense of tagging kind of kept me cool. That's something I can do. So there's always these little groups, even though I did try to blend with some of them, and some crossed over, and we had some friends in other groups as well, but I never had a sense of belonging. So that's a very deep need for us as a species. When we live on autopilot, it's like it's constantly scanning to meet these needs. It really lives in a very early experience of life where if you understand the child's needs, where does the child meet his or her needs? They're usually meeting them externally. Scanning our environment, living in this very autopilot way of life, certain patterns. Like narcissists, to really understand the narcissism is the child within us. It's a child wound, and there's some data suggesting really closely related to the mother, so the mother's wound.
So there's substantial amount of research and data coming out that it is a fracture primarily within the mother and child's relationship that leads to narcissism. And of course, let's be reminded that the child is the narcissistic self. This is a healthy development within the child.
And if that is wounded and scarred in this very early developmental stage, then we grow up and obviously we continue those patterns through life. And we can seek these validation, this love through external resources. I'm sure all of us can recognize where we have fallen into maybe some toxic relationship patterns with people or other things that we bring of a value to us. Working with men in particular, we can use women as a validation for ourselves. This, for me, and we'll have to talk about this another time, this is the shadow part, right? So this is the shadow part of what's called the hero. There's these are archetypes, and we'll start to dig deep into that and look at that as this need to overcome the feminine. And this is deeply related. Again, so this is deeply related, can be deeply related to a wound at this very fragile age that leads to immaturity. So then we live in this autopilot. And now how does that relate to Groundhog's Day? Well, when we live in this repetitive pattern, think about it, repetitive pattern over and over again, we're living unconscious, then we're in this Groundhog's Day. And the symbol of that was Bill Murray's character, him being this weatherman going out to see, are we having more winter, are we having more spring? And he's very egocentric, very narcissistic. He's very all about himself. He's, I'm the head of the universe. I'm the center of the universe. I'm the shit. And you see this portrayed in his character as he's going to this little town to go see this groundhog. Obviously, for those that haven't seen the movie, you might want to do earmuffs or change the episode because I'm giving some spoiler alerts. So you watch his character, and then he soon realizes that he is having Groundhog's Day, but he's still an asshole, right? He's still mean to the people. He's still a grumpy. He avoids his friend, I guess some colleague walking towards him. He pushes him in the puddle. He's doing these very egocentric things. He's trying to constantly sleep with Andie MacDowell's character because he knows he's going to come back over and over again. So he's trying all these ways to sleep with her, very in his own ego.
And the ego is the child. So you see him acting childish.
And so as the movie goes on, obviously it starts to lead to other things. So he gets depressed. You can see his energy. He's not even getting dressed. He's going in his pajamas. He's just giving in this helpless sense of despair. It's the same thing over and over again. This could be triggering for some. So he does give... you watch him and he drives his car off a cliff, suicide. He starts to live in, again, this helpless, hopeless despair state of being. And what's so very interesting is all that kind of changes. And how that changes is he finally gets honest. He comes to Andie MacDowell's character and he says, I'm a real asshole. And at that moment, that sense of honesty, that sense of vulnerability and authenticity is what actually sets him free. And then the whole movie changes from that place on. He starts to become part of the community. He's helping the 8 old ladies with their flat tire. He's getting a cat out of the tree. He's playing piano and bringing people together to enjoy life. He goes from this Groundhog's Day of very egocentric, his own needs. And then when he shifts is he gets honest and then he starts becoming part of community. And I think that's the idea of what is called a active participant in our daily life, is that we start taking this accountability for our life, that
about having a conscious choice. And when we have this conscious choice and we exhibit that we can make a choice, we're actually becoming an active participant in our own life and understanding we aren't going to be conscious every moment of the day.
And that's okay. But the fact is that we can catch, 10% of it.
I heard that if you can create 1% change every day, that's 365% of change at the end of the year.
Again, whatever we can catch and then have these tools of accountability, vulnerability, responsibility, and that's a big one too. Responsibility is the behavior. So the responsibility component is the actual behavior. We are responding, the ability to respond to the present moment. That is the key component that I think when we're talking about being this active participant is the ability to, one is obviously acknowledgement, the ownership, and then the responsibility. What do you want to do with that? Right? So now that we have this great awareness, we have to start applying it into a behavior to respond with it in a way. It can be challenging. Look, it's not going to go from one way to another the next day. It's a practice. We're going to make mistakes, and understanding that. And I think that's another place where you can really start to tap into relationships with. So if you're in partnership with somebody, bring attention to this. It's not an emotional dumping and that you're responsible for my emotions, but just the fact that I'm noticing this, a pattern that I have, and I am announcing it so that I can have some accountability in my life. So I'm announcing it to my partnership. I am witnessing and I'm very aware that this is happening. And then my responsibility, my responding to that is now I'm going to do a behavior to fix that, to make that right. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not going to be perfect every moment, but I am committed to making change for myself and for our partnership. It takes time learning to be that active participant. And the reason why we want to learn to be that active participant so we can notice more about life. Autopilot, you're just really in this big stupor. You're just behind the scenes. You're not really paying attention. We miss moments.
Being an active participant,
start to engage with life a little bit more. And that gets us out of this idea of what's called Groundhog's Day. Groundhog's Day on repetitive mode becomes very anxious driven, becomes very depressive at times. And I think that movie with Bill Murray, that's really what you're seeing. You're seeing the evolution of a man who is waking up, and he's waking up from an unconscious state of being to a conscious state of being. And what actually happens is there's happiness there. And again, it's not all the time. It's going to be moments that we recognize what happiness is. We can't recognize what happiness is if we keep living on this unconscious level of just autopilot. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments. Again, disagree, agree, you like it, you don't like it. I'm open to it all. I try to stay open. I try to bring some good stuff and some good thought-provoking conversations here with everybody. And if you do like it, share it.
All right, everybody. That was a packed episode of Man Uncaved. We broke down Autopilot. We took a look at Groundhog's Day and how to come out of Groundhog's Day is becoming an active participant in our life. This is Man Uncaved, coming out of hiding. Again, this is Shane.